What's going on, people? It is Community Beacon. It's Friday, August 21st already. So we're 2 weeks into school for those of our
Ooh,
kids that are attending school, still in school. Funny enough, both Elijah and Paul were sick this week. Paul's second, I don't know if it was the second or third day, he was like, I don't feel good. I was like, "Ooh, it's the second or third day." It was super reminiscent of when I was in school. I remember I used to tell my mother I didn't feel good. I just feel bad. She used to come and pick me up from school. So I'm like, man, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So he's a chip off the old block if I ever saw one. But yeah, so he made it through his first week of school, second week of school for Elijah. I think he ended up not going in today. So I get to check on him a little bit later. Other than that, guys, I'm Palm Beach Mike, your real estate guy here in northern Palm Beach County, Florida. It's Community Beacon. We got my brother from another mother on the other side of the screen, the Joel Simmons. What is going on?
what's up, bro? Glad to be here. Community Beacon one more time. I love the stories about you and Paul and Elijah. I recall that as well, man. Just not feeling well. And you know, the crazy part about it is that like sickness is going around. It's like rampant. You know, my niece got sick, my mom got sick, my dad got sick. You know, it's just like so many people just got sick. And I know that whenever you go to school, it's like all of these germs are showing up at school with you. And you're not used to all of these germs. It's one thing. We all carry germs. I forget what the statistic was, but it's like some 20 to 40,000 different types of germs. You ever saw Peanuts, Charlie Brown?
Cartoon, yeah.
Cartoon, yes. And there was one kid, I don't remember what his name was, but he always had the cloud of dust around him. And like
Final.
Lionel, was it Lionel? I thought Lionel was, oh, that's Schroeder. So Lionel, yes, Lionel. And he's always got the cloud of dust around him. And man, it was just like, when I learned about that statistic, that's all I could ever think about for the rest of my life. Ever since I was taught that years ago, it's been like a decade. So maybe there's more than 20 to 40,000 different types of bacteria that are surrounding us at this point in time. But they were like, yeah, wherever you go, there is a cloud like so big that's around you at all times of all of the bacteria that is in you, on you, and surrounding you at any given moment at all times. And when you come into like that, those 18 inches, 24 inches, you are mixing your clouds with somebody else's clouds. And you don't know if those clouds mix.
It's an interesting. I never thought of it like that. And the clouds mixing. Yeah, I mean, with the especially with Paul. Paul has not been in a structured school his entire 5 years. So this was his first time being around all of those kids. So when he did say he wasn't feeling well, I was like, maybe it's catching up with him. But I said, if you need me, just call me. Told the nurse at the school, if you need me, give me a call. But cloud mixing, people. So so if you were a hypochondriac or if you were felt some kind of way about it, there's some new information. That's the first time I heard it, but I believe it. Imma knock on wood too. I haven't been sick in a while, man. I really don't get sick anymore. I don't know what it is, but I don't want it to start happening either. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's
And
get into it, man. What's been on your mind prior to getting on? Oh, go ahead. You
and my numbers are wrong. It's 38 trillion bacterial cells.
even better. Even
38
better.
trillion. I said 20 to
Yeah, 1,000. Yeah,
40,000.
yeah,
I
yeah.
should have said 20 to 40 trillion.
There's some trivia for you people.
And like we are all living in harmony with our bacteria.
Some of us are. Some of us are like want to be like the bubble boy and fight not integrating with the bacteria. Yeah,
The
so
bacteria is in the bubble with the boy.
yeah, well,
He can't get rid of his own.
that's
Some of
true.
that stuff is self-producing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, get into it, man. I know you wanted to talk about harmony today, so I'm curious to know where you were coming from and how that resonated with you for the day and was on your mind.
Yeah, man, I actually think that the conversation we started just like locks right into it because when I think about like that bacteria and everything, and I'm sure we'll expand out and leave bacteria at some point in time, but some of that bacteria is like necessary. It's like necessary. It's a necessary evil, because your body needs certain bacteria to produce and or fight off other things. It's crazy how what could be bad for another could be good for somebody. There's an old saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure, and it's just like there is the duality of things, where something can be good for you and something could be bad for you. And then I think that there's more of a spectrum, right? A kaleidoscope of things, because I don't think that it's all just so binary, right? And I love that you brought that up maybe about 3 episodes ago about how it's not always binary, right? We're not always at a quote unquote crossroads, where we have one turn or another turn. Because there's always the way that we came. So that would make 3 options, right? Just in that. And then there's the untried path. And then there's going up. And then there's digging down. Then there's going inward. And there's meditating. And, so there's just so many different options when we start to dig into it. But it's just interesting because, like, for an individual to have 38 trillion bacteria, in the body, surrounding the body, on the body at any given moment, and then yet and still there are certain people that are dying from bacterial infections, right? It's like out of 38 trillion, one of them took them out. That's crazy. Like, which one was it? It's like, I don't want that one here. You don't come to my party, you're not invited. If I only knew the name of the one out of the 38 trillion, I would name him and I would tell him not to show up today, right? So it's just very, very interesting to me because at the very least, we are living in harmony with these 38 trillion bacterial cells that are engrossing our habitat. And every individual human is living in harmony with their 38 trillion until you get to that one specific individual or two or whatever that collective number is that you're pointing out, the bubbles of the people where the bacteria that they have is causing something grossly malfeasant inside of them. So I like to open so much more to it than just that, but let's open there and hear what you have to say.
If that's harmony, if that's being in harmony, what's out of harmony?
So this is the curious question, right? As I was thinking about this earlier, and I told you about it, I think to a certain degree, I had a long conversation with my younger brother. And whenever we talk, right? We don't talk often. We don't talk as often as you and I speak. But whenever we speak, right? And some of the things that we discuss, you and I have discussed. And then there's some things that you and I haven't discussed, as I would imagine for you and other people that you have conversations with, as well as him. And so it's just interesting that this was a word that he offered during the course of our conversation, and it resonated so well. It resonated very well with me, harmony. Like, because the first thought that came to my mind was in thinking, and I guess I pause right now because the context of what I was saying when I thought this first thought was the singularity and the plurality of a scripture in the book of Genesis. And it brought me to a thought of, if I heard one person sing, I would say that they sang, this one person sings, and that's singular. And then when I hear a choir sing, that would be plural. However, if the choir comes into harmony, they would make one voice, and then it will be singular again. And it's like, so what exactly is harmony? And as we were talking about it, he had phrased a study on the edge of chaos, right? And so the study of the edge of chaos is about coming to a place where, if you will, peace and chaos both reside, and how the intersection is not exactly aligned. It's not really an edge, but it's kind of fuzzy in the way he described it, and how there's like a chasm there. And as you look deeper, it's got edges and it's rigid and it goes up and down and over and around and all these different types of things. And as we started to discuss that, we started to dive into this thing about harmony, right? And how if harmony is when those voices came together to create one voice, then was not the one in harmony alone. And so it was like, what exactly is harmony? What exactly is it? And so that's why I said to you, I wanted to hear your thoughts on harmony and not to come on and to explain it, but to really hear your thoughts and to see where we would end up going with what is harmony. 'Cause I think that there's many different ways that we can think about it, and we can always pull out Webster's dictionary and
That's what I'm doing.
we can give the definition of
I'd
harmony.
like to hear what the definition is. Really looking it up on Chat GPT, so I need to make sure that it's not the way that it talks to me. It says harmony. Hey, harmony is the state in which distinct or even opposing parts coexist and work together without losing their individuality. In plain terms, difference without unnecessary conflict. Isn't that something?
That's it. You know what the interesting part about that is? While we were in the conversation, I told him about a show that I mentioned with you on this show. And so this is like this is to me, this is like the expanse of like minds and synchronicities and like these conversations and how deep they dive. Because I mentioned to him, which he actually had seen the movie Everywhere, All Things Everywhere at One Time or something like that, whatever that was called. I gave my disclaimer, because there's plenty of people that will identify me as being this individual, and there's plenty of people who think that I am this individual. And so they may be like, well, why would he like that movie? And I don't really care what people think or whatever. But I just give my disclaimer anyway, that there was something so special about one particular part, because after you go through the storm of the entire movie, there's one part at the end where the mother comes, where she's driven to the IRS building with her husband, her daughter, and her daughter's girlfriend. And she hops out the car, walks towards the office while her daughter starts speaking or schmoozing with her girlfriend. And she turns back around and she's like, your hair looks terrible, and this, that, and the other, and you ought to do that, and this, that, and the other. And then she's like, okay, thanks for the ride. Have a great day. And the kids who were once at ends, like the entire movie, there's this huge fight, especially with the daughter and the mother. They look at each other and they're like, and they just smile and they're almost in agreement. Not necessarily that they agree with what she said, but they don't disagree with what she said. But it's like obvious that they accept what she said. And it's obvious that she accepts what they are, what they look like. And they all just like do themselves. Then they walk into the IRS and the girl drives off. There's absolutely no complications whatsoever. It's harmony. It's when you don't force somebody else to be what you think, and when they don't force you to be what you think. You simply just accept all as
Definition that's showing to me, it goes on to say, to your point, it does not require agreement, it does not require sameness or the absence of tension. It says in music, harmony comes from different notes relating well. In life, it can mean, I know this is it's putting this in for me because these are the conversations that I have with this LLM. It says in life, it could mean allowing joy, grief, strength, vulnerability, ambition, and rest to belong within the same whole. And just as I read that, especially that last part, like those words, joy, grief, a lot of people don't think those things can happen at the same time. Strength, vulnerability, and ambition. You don't too much hear a lot of people putting vulnerability and ambition together. And then it says, and the rest to belong with the same and the whole. And so you brought up, this is the second time you've mentioned it in as many weeks, was the duality of a thing. What this to me really seems like is non duality, where there's all these things can exist at the same time. There doesn't have to be a either or because you did this, I did this. And in the context of that same conversation at the end of that movie, it was like the acceptance of I accept my mother is going to be the way that she is. Like there's no change in her. Like this is our relationship. And the mothers said whatever, and the mothers accepting them for, I think at that time it had to be because they were like a same sex relationship. And in the movie, there was something about letting the mother know, like, she wasn't, like a roommate or something. Like, they were actually together, the 2 women, and and having that to give that to the mother. So the mother throughout the entire movie, which almost now that I'm the movie is so interesting, but there's so much to pull out of the movie because there's so much metaphors and symbolism and all these things happening within it. And it's really at the end, I guess at some point it was like being accepted, right? Like the mother accepting the daughter for everything that could have, we grow our kids up or we have our kids, and there's a part of us, and I'll speak for myself, where it's like, man, I want them to go down this exact path, and this is, these are the things that I stand for. This is what I embody. This is, quote unquote, who I am. This is this identity that I have for myself. And I would like my kids to be just like me and, at some point be better than me. So be me times 2, right? Mike times 2, and not seeing that this person, this child has their own path, their own journey, their own way of having these different relationships. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a path. It can actually be in relationships within itself. It can be in business. It can be all these different things of where we just want it to be a certain way with these expectations. And if it's not, I asked you earlier, like, what is not harmony? We could easily say to ourselves, like, oh, well, this is not in harmony because it doesn't meet our expectations of what it's supposed to sound like. And it still could be music to somebody, right? We still can relate to it as what it is, as opposed to what it is that we want it to be. Or we can try to make it the way that we want to be. And I think all within there is like that in itself is not harmony, but the ability to let go of what we believe that person is, and sometimes even within ourselves, what we think we are, because it might not necessarily be that. I see a lot of people who are out of harmony within themselves, although they've created this identity over time, or they've taken on this identity, so to speak. It's so fascinating. And all these things can happen. And I say all these things can happen at the same time because I can feel one way about it one moment, and then another moment I can be accepting of it. And I think that's okay for myself to be back in harmony because am I accepting it or am I not?
That's an interesting question. I don't think that it's a bad one at all. But when I thought about this and it like arrived to me, it was perfect. I mean, this thing was just so very interesting. And I actually have a question for you as well. And it's like, what do you think the challenge is of, creating harmony within inside of one's life, right? Whether it's in self or whether it's in a group, right? So I just wanted to make sure that I offer that question before I lose it in the midst of dialogue. And when I thought about what we were discussing, and I love that we had that discussion before this, I was in the gym, and while I was in the gym, talking about synchronicities, while I was in the gym, I was listening to a book, and the book that I was listening to is Will. And for whatever the reason is, there's just so many similarities that are just like popping up, and the way that they are popping up is not in direct similarity to like him, but it's more about like this state of mind at these particular moments in my life. Cause there'll be some times when I just zone out and I didn't hear anything at all because I'm gone. And so at this particular moment, I've walked into the gym and I've gone into the movie room so that I can get on the treadmill. And at somewhere in between 10 minutes and 16 minutes, I lost myself in the everything, everywhere, all at once happened to me. And I was transported. However, I was right there on that treadmill. I was everywhere. And so I was in the book and Will was saying something, 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 and then he used a particular word. And then at the same time, I was watching the movie, and the movie was Doctor Strange, right? And at this moment, Doctor Strange was in the middle of this battle where he had an out-of-body experience, right? And at the same time, I had left and I was gone somewhere thinking about whatever this is that was in my mind. And at one moment, Will said, that was strange. And strange had something that happened that was strange, and my mind had something that was strange, and it all just like crescendoed. And so I was in the place of a book, the place of a movie, and a place of my mind, and all three things worked at one time to inform me that this was strange. And it was thereby being strange, it became not strange to me, but it became opening. And it was not strange at all. It was like awesome and wondrous and telling and fulfilling. The timing was breathtaking. And so, like, much of my day just kept flowing out of this. And hence the randomness of my message to my brother, how you doing? And his reply being perfect timing for us to connect and have a conversation. So all of these things are happening. And to me, this is just like harmony. But I didn't have that word. Wasn't until he introduced it that I had harmony, at least the thought of it, right? Because you can be in something and not know you're in something. But then are you really in it? I think that would take us on to a different tangent. I'm very cerebral right now, so I'm being somewhat cautious not to go down too many alleyways because I'm just very, very cerebral. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like I'd like to hear what you may be thinking about.
Yeah, so when you brought up the synchronicities and what happened to you during that moment, I think is always super powerful. It honestly reminds me of like you call the people who do what is it astrology when they talk about Capricorns and Aquariuses or whatever. Is that astrology? Is that what the science is? I don't know. Anyways, whoever talks about astrology and or whatever, and so you'll look on they'll give you your reading, so to speak. I know I'm butchering it. I'm not really in it like that. And then you'll start to see things start to line up in that way. Synchronicity, synchronistically, synchronistically. I get it. And so, but then I started thinking about Jung, and I'm going to read what Jung wrote about synchronicities. Carl Jung.
Mhm.
I was doing a lot of Carl Jung last year and the year before, and he says it's when your inner state. This is what he believed. When your inner state and an external event unexpectedly corresponds. The connection is based on meaning, not cause and effect. Synchronicities often arise during emotionally intense periods, major transitions, dreams. I've seen that a lot. My father loves that. Or deep psychological work. And it says they may reveal an unconscious pattern becoming visual to consciousness. And so it went through some examples, but overall, the idea was it's a causal connecting principle. It says reality may seem sometimes organize itself through shared meaning rather than ordinary physical causations. And like super layman's terms, it's like really what you're focused on or things that come up, they tend to come up more. You tend to see them more. There's a phrase where they say, anyways, if it comes back to me. If you're focused on something, especially during these intense periods, that you'll start to see and notice these different patterns, I think is awesome. And the reason why I say it's awesome to me, I don't really care how it happens, is that things do tend to flow or you have the feeling of what it is flowing, which goes back to my thought process surrounding harmony. If we speak into that word, is that it's really the way that you relate to it. And we can start to go and look for things to find to make this thing harmonious. Like it's really this mind to me, the experience of it is this mind over matter things. It doesn't make it less for the person magical or special. I think unique is a greater word. Unique to that individual, the sauce that a person puts on a thing, because it also can start to just allow you to find things that, like Young mentioned, that you normally wouldn't see. And you start to recognize it, which led to that last part that you spoke about, where like are to be in something and to be aware of it. Like, can you really be in something and not be aware of it, or be in something and be aware of it? And then at the moment, what happens at the moment that you become aware of it? Like that in itself can make things so much more like meaningful. Like things, when you start to become and start to notice these harmonious things because they're happening all the time, like you being born in itself, like we forget about it, but when we start talking about germs, I don't know how much sperm it is, but it's like millions out of the millions of sperm, right? Has to connect. And all these things have to happen in order for you just to be here. We take it for granted because we're here. But when like all these things have to happen. So there's always some kind of, and it could be when you look at it, like, that's how I got here. When you think about your past, like, how did I end up in this spot right now? It's because of all of my experiences, all of my challenges, all of the people that I came across. I was born to the perfect woman that was born to the perfect man. Like all these things had to happen for me and Joel to end up right here, sitting across from each other, talking about these things that had happened. Like when I think about life's just synchronicities or just the blessings of it, like it happens all within that point. But then we do have moments of this where it's like, oh, we're aware of it to where it leads me to reach out to somebody, in this case, your brother, and for him to say, oh, this is the perfect time, as if it was just waiting for these things to happen. Like all of this stuff is happening. All these things are happening all at the same time. And then it just meet and it culminates into this moment, and then the awareness of it. And I think even in that, the thing is that you can really take that either way, right? A person could sit here and take it as a blessing, which is what I choose to do, and a person could easily take it as a curse and start to curse every little thing it was that brought them up to this moment, because this moment doesn't feel right for them, because it wasn't what they expected. It wasn't what they desired. And it wasn't even about the actual desire. It was actually about the exact desire. Like I needed it. I need these things to happen exactly this way, as opposed to allowing life to quote unquote unfold, which answers my question for me is like, so what harmony is not. And harmony is not me having to will it to be Mike's exact way. Because although that might be fulfilling for me to say, yeah, I did that, or I'm the one that made this happen, right? Not to say that a person can't take joy in their creation of what was created, but also to allow for it to be something even bigger and better, to be harmonious in a way that it allows everything to be happening, and not to take the specialness away from somebody joining in with this harmonious moment. Like I can't have this moment by myself without you, Joe. I can come on here and talk. Lord knows I can, and talk for 20, 30, 40 minutes by myself and be fine with it, right? But then the allowing it or Joel coming in is like it creates this harmonious thing, because if I was going to talk today, it was not going to be about this, and I wouldn't have had this expansion that I'm having now, just in regards to talking to harmony. So yeah, so what harmony is not, to answer my question, it's not the way that exactly it needs to turn out, or who exactly needs to be around for it to happen, or not be around for it to happen. It's about allowing this moment to happen, and being accepting of it, with me being who I am. I may
Hmm.
not necessarily be super happy about it, right? Like I could have been, I would have could have much rather wanted this to happen, because I would have the feeling of, accomplishment or something. But if I just allow it to happen, I can also have that part too, where it's just like, man, it could have been different, right? And then that's a whole different fight, which is not being in harmony. So I'm almost really thinking like equanimity is definitely plays a part to the harmony of a thing. And that's something that I strive for all the time. Like, like what exactly is this thing that I'm getting out of harmony about? It might be easier to be in harmony than to be out of harmony.
The last few words that you said was that was heavy. Is harmony a state of mind, a state of being, or does it not require the state at all? Does it need us? Does it not need us? Do we get the opportunity to say what harmony is and what it isn't? By definition, and I can't quote it right now. I'm just hearing it. But by definition, it's like where one thing meets another thing and it accepts whatever that thing is as is. So there could be violence on one end, peace on the other end. And maybe the individual who desires peace is not in harmony with the one who desires violence. Maybe the one who desires violence is not in harmony with the one who desires peace, but is it harmony above that? Like, does it need for entities to live harmonious? If harmony is a place where these things work in existence together, in an orchestra, when we as people create the music for a movie that is at a point of disruption, a lot of times in a drama or in a horror, they will use opposite effects, the playing smoothly of a piano and then the clashing of a cymbal, rumbling of a drum to enact something eerie, a feeling, to unlock something inside of someone else. And sometimes we'll hear it and we'll be like, oh my gosh, it's like chalk, like fingernails on a chalkboard. I hate it. But at the same time, it's like something that locks somebody in to remembering a scene forever. It's like an invisible scale. It's like some of the things that we discuss, Mike, is just like these, it's like, are these things like beyond? It's like we reach a level of contemplation, perspective. And then I love what you just said just a moment ago. It's like, I can accept it now or not accept it later. It's like, oh my gosh. I remember I had a conversation with you about something like that. I was like, my God, this, that, and the other. And, you're like, I hear growth. I was like, that's interesting. Because the perspective constantly changes depending on which viewpoint you take. It's like, am I looking from the inside? Am I looking from the outside? Am I looking from above? Am I looking from below? Am I looking towards the left or towards the right or from the left or from the right? Or am I not looking at all? Do I see within my mind? Do I see within my heart? Do I see within my gut? Do I see within? Am I taking on somebody else's words and allowing them to guide me? Am I not taking on someone else's words? When I don't take on someone else's words, is it because I'm taking on the narrative that I've learned, which is somebody else's words? Who came up with the first word? How are their words right? Does that mean that their words are true? I think I mentioned it earlier while I was in a different conversation. I said, what is to say that green is green? Why is it not onion? Because it's hard for me to believe that onion is green because onion has a taste. It must be onion. Green cannot be onion because it has a taste. Coffee cannot be white. Cannot be because it's coffee. It's a drink. That doesn't make sense. When I see a shark, that is not a mug. It's like these things, we've created identifications for every single thing in the world. Then we claim ownership of it. And then we pass it on to another generation and tell them not to forget it. And then it gets passed so long that we forget that we are not supposed to forget it, that we are supposed to be creative, and we no longer know how to create anything. And then at the end of the reality of it is that what exactly have we created? Is not everything that we create out of something that was already created? All things are made now. I take the tools of everything. You say, well, no, there was no tools there. Well, where did you get your mind? Was not your mind created before you knew how to use your mind? Oh my gosh. Like you just went down the pathway of the sperm. It's like, oh my gosh, all of these things had to happen in order for me to show up. And then I couldn't even think on my own. I don't even know what my thoughts were. What if I was, not to say I'm not a genius today, but what if I was, what if my IQ went through the roof as a baby and I had to dumb myself down? There's a cartoon, it's, just like following this pathway. There's a cartoon, I think it's called Baby Genius or something. And it's these little kids that are walking around in Pampers and they're like solving the world's problems, right? They're like masters of disguise. But whenever parents hear them, it's
Boss
Google
baby.
Gaga. Huh?
Boss baby.
Boss baby. That's what it is. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That's it. And it's like when we start to theorize behind that, it's like, oh my gosh, what if, right? The great what if, the land beyond land, right? What if? Yeah, the space beyond space, the matter beyond matter, right? The expansion beyond expansion. What if? Gosh, man. What if, as a brain inside of that little body, we were at super intelligence? And the more we attempted to mix in, we lost intelligence.
Definitely, emotionally. I would argue that emotionally, the older we get, the more rigid we become emotionally
Mm.
and in the way that we are. But the
Look,
pathway that you're taking, I think is so interesting because it's almost, I mean, because what's happening now for anybody who's followed along this far, it's really like attempting to take all the air out of the room with your breath. Like that's the verge of where what this conversation is. It's like because all of these things are to some point, to some level, true. I liked when you started saying, like, because it comes to a point, like, well, who is asking these questions, right? Like, who
mm,
is asking these questions? And sometimes these questions are asked when you and I aren't together. You're probably asking them to yourself. And then it's like, well, who's listening to these questions? Right? So now we start to think about the observer within yourself, the what some people call the witness, and then you have these different identities, and if you could think about IFS, which is intrafamily, I think it's intrafamily services or something, where they start talk about these different parts of you and when they come up and how they react and at what point in it, what where we are. But you could possibly have, if we were going to just base it on IQs, like a certain IQ, right? Like you're born a certain kind of way. Here's something for people. If you supplement with iodine, it's been said to say that your child will have the woman, if she supplements with iodine while she's pregnant, the children have ended up having IQ at least 10 points higher. Do with that information what you may. For those of us who are thinking about having children.
we are not doctors, nor do
I'm not
disclaimer.
well, I mean, do the research for sure. For sure, I'm not a doctor, but when you're born, you do things that you like instinctually want to do, right? Like when you are uncomfortable, you are allowed to cry, right? Like or you cry out. If you find something that symptomatically that feels humorous, you'll laugh. And over time, what happens is that you start to be told that things are compartmentalized. Like, this is the time to do this. This is the time not to do that, right? This is the time to be joyous. For me, it was like Christmas. You're allowed to be joyous. It's Christmas time or in church. You're allowed to be joyous in church. That is an acceptable time for this for you to express it. But then you attempt to be joyous during certain funerals, right? Not in New Orleans because they have the whole second line where they're dancing and they're playing instruments and they're going down the street for someone who passes away. But in a lot of other cultures, like no one's in the corner like laughing at a funeral, or being joyous. At that time, it is okay to cry, right? So for people to cry during a funeral, and let's say you're a male, over time you're told, "Hey, boys don't cry." Was it? So over time you may start to lose a lot of these or be in touch with a lot of these different emotions that you may have. So the answer, when you ask that question, like for a child and even boss baby, like to a certain point before it became this language or such, like they're much a more freer thing. You also mentioned we come up with the names for these different things, like the onion versus green, or so on and so forth. One thing that came to mind was as we're thinking about music, I'm thinking about Pharrell, and I think Dr. Dre has the same thing. I think Kanye's similar, right? Their musical genius is that they see notes as colors. Like I don't have that quote unquote ability, but the way that they compose music is through vibrational, and the vibrational gives them certain colors as opposed to how we would, listen to it. That's why they have become musical geniuses because apparently they know how to put the different colors together, as opposed to I would say like, well, put these notes together, right? The sounds need to be similar. They're seeing the sounds, the vibration as colors. I digress. Coming up with these different terms for these different things are ways for us to manage. Like we manage, this is our way of managing and having quote unquote control of things is through communication and words. So we'll manage it. We'll label ourselves. We'll say this is that, according to that end for us to communicate what this kind of feel like or what the flavor of it's like. It's interesting you brought up flavor for onions because now when I even talk about my emotions, right, I'll say, well, the flavor is happiness, right? Or the flavor is anger, right? Or the flavor is joyful. Like that, I start to differentiate it as far as flavors as opposed to the feeling of it. Although, if I'm coaching someone or we're coaching each other rather, it's more about like where's the location of the thing, right? Like, is it like where do you feel this feeling, right? And that just allows a person to kind of allow it to say, okay, well, this is what's happening symptomatically. And what I did was I said that this is anger, or this is excitement, or this is anxiety, right? Like I felt it this way. And interestingly enough, I heard there was a study where anxiety and excitement are the same thing, except one is not expressed. So if you're anxious, oftentimes you're not expressing it or you're not processing it in a certain kind of way. So this excitement could end up becoming anxiety if you can't express it. Can you imagine that?
Mm.
Can you imagine being and then even in this conversation, I'm so grateful for the work that we've done and I've done over the time to where expansiveness for some is anxiety. Like you're stepping into this huge role, or you started to see things like in this huge way. Like these things are just happening. All these things are happening. And because you don't know how to express this excitement over time, it becomes anxiety. And what happens is that then you'll start to constrict or you'll start to sabotage things because it's become so expansive in your mind and you don't necessarily have the outlet or you don't know how or you compartmentalized it. Like, well, I don't know what happened. Whatever your experience was not to be big. Man, how many people as children were actually coming into their own, so to speak? And it might have been too much for a caretaker, an adult, or someone that they respected, mother, father, grandmother, whatever. They're looking at this child, and this child is just starting to be big. Like they're feeling this excitement and they're letting it out. And then someone says, "You better stop. You better calm down. You need to go to your room. You need to, you need to stop. Put your hands to your side or whatever rule was at the time." And then think about how we as children us as children, how we start to think about that in our mind, how we start to relate to this excitement. Oh, I can't feel that because if I feel that, then this happens, discipline, whatever it is, some negative consequence. So then I start to learn to internalize this thing, this big, beautiful, awesome child that would the other adult couldn't handle that because maybe their parents couldn't handle that. But here's this child that's starting to show who they actually are, and then it's being tampered down by whatever it was by some adult or whatever. And it's really now I'm thinking about it. There was one time when I remember I used to go to Elijah's school. I remember he was in the kindergarten or the first grade. And I remember going to the teacher. I said, "Listen, I know we have all these rules or you conduct your classroom a certain kind of way." I said, "But the one thing I don't want to do is look. This is speaking of getting big, Paul.
Hmm.
Give me 1 second when I'm finished, all right? Give me a sec. Where is it? Bring it to me.
With a name like Paul, you're going to demand your moment. That name is just too strong for him to come in and
Hold on,
ask for
give me one
anything
second.
and just turn around. My gosh, my God. I think that's interesting. And once again, here we go, synchronicities. At the moment, brother is talking about the school and one of his children walks in and expresses his freedom and liberty of speech right then and there. I think that that's interesting. This is also interesting. I don't often get that moment of this self-time. Normally, I'm the one who ends up with this moment for whatever the reason, whatever the cause is. So this is really interesting. This whole process of what we're talking about between harmony and synchronicity and control. control of moments, management. And I think there is that concern that many people have. I know that I've had it before, and there are times when I still experience it. And I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to draw back and to think about it, about exactly what exactly am I doing? Am I managing the things that are going on around me, or are the things managing me? Or is there something else that is happening in between? Am I simply being? And are the other components or aspects of whatever it is, are they simply being? And so it's a place where, simply a place where things are happening. I think that this is quite interesting because this just happened right now. While you, brother, were talking about, one child, another child walks in and he's like, I'm going to present this thought that I have. And at that very moment, he does it and he's persistent. And we get a chance to watch how you respond, right? And I just think all of this is just quite interesting because, especially with children, and one of the things that I was going to offer as a question to you, not for you particularly, but to continue our conversation. There's no challenge whatsoever in it. Whether you answer or not doesn't matter. But just a thought. It's like when you're raising a child and you believe that the route that they are going is not the route that is best for them, what is there, right? Is there discipline? Is there correction? Is there allowance? What is there? Because there's so many different servings that can be given to this youth. So many, right? We can layer the table with all types of food to serve them, leaning into the analogy of taste. What's it taste like, right? Leaning into that. There's so many different servings that we can give them, right? And we know, or at least we believe, or at least we have a construct that whatever serving we give them, if they choose to eat it, or if they don't choose to eat it, or if they choose to eat some of it, that there's a possibility that they will have a certain type of growth from whatever they take in or they don't, right? And maybe we don't know for sure if the thing that we're giving will produce the thing that we think, right? To speak in an agricultural form or from the standpoint of a farmer, what if it is the bean that Jack laid? It doesn't produce corn. It doesn't produce wheat. It produces a beanstalk into a higher level of concept. All right. Go ahead, brother. You was about to tell us about your son, and I went somewhere just with.
No, no, and I love where you went. Everything happens for the perfect reason and the perfect time for you to get that thought out. I think, man, especially as a parent, it is a dope book. And this is probably one of the harder books I've ever read. There's two books that I'm like that have really changed, a lot of the way that I think about things. But they were also like the books that I'm like, I don't want to read this thing. Like it sits on my dresser or somewhere close, and I'm just like, every time I look at it, I'm like, ah. So sometimes I'll have to quote unquote force myself to read it or allow myself, right? Like, okay, just start going through some pages, and it ends up giving some great insight. And I still haven't finished. I still haven't finished both of the books. 'Cause it's so much. It's a lot to take in. So the first one is The Message to the Black Man by Elijah
Hmm.
something that totally changed my paradigm after reading it. So if anybody gets to read it, and you don't have to be a black man to read it. If you're able to look at it from a just be open into receiving whatever message is in there, because there's something in there that is for everybody, but it's called The Message to the Black Man by Elijah Muhammad. And this second book that I'm reading now, Joe Hudson is the one that suggested it, was Listen by Patty Whitford. And it talks about how we relate to our children. And I saw Joe Hudson's relationship with his children. There's a couple people who have some really, really good relationships that I'm just like, man, that's dope to have that kind of openness with a child where your child could just, you and them could just have these different conversations. So it's something that I strive for with both Elijah and Paul, right? Just really about how I see them, and the kind of relationship that I have with them is really essential to the relationship that I want to have with my child. This, or myself, excuse me. This is what the book talks about. And so now, even as what I call parenting, I'm like, I'm really reparenting myself at the same time. Because when there's times when they do something that triggers me, it's really something within myself that probably wasn't able to be seen when I was a child. right? For whatever reason, how I was brought up or whatever. And I had awesome parents, super awesome parents. But there's things that we were just kind of taught. And it was more so coming from a communication of just dominating. And I don't want that. I want my child to grow up. And one of the reasons why I think the school that one of the things that the teacher at Paul's school told me was like, we're not teaching them just to teach rote memory. We're teaching them so they can think. When she said that, I was just like, yeah, this is the kind of place I want Paul at. And not what I want them to think, right? I've had so many experiences, so many thoughts. It's really PTSD at this moment because I allowed myself to get into situations that I had no business being in, right? And from that part, I can tend to be super overprotective for my kids because I'm like, I don't want I don't want. I've taken these L's, as I heard Beethoven say once, so you
Yeah.
don't have to, right? But I can also, because of that, I can also kind of overcompensate for it to where I don't want them to have their own journey. And this whole thing is about their journey. They're mines, but they're not mines. I'm really just a steward. Like they were allowed to come through me, and I'm a steward for these children. They're bigger than that. They're more than that, right? I just happen to be put in the place of father where and guide, and I'm gonna do the best that I can. But I don't even know. And I know I don't know because there's so many people that came before me that told me about what they knew. And that was just from what they knew in their limited point of view. All this stuff is just as big as, like I said before, attempting to take, breathe in this entire room, all the air in this room, little old me trying to be able to expound that and express that to people. It's just not going to happen. I know some of the things that I know from my experience, but it might be something different for them. What I allow my kids to do is I allow them to have this, sometimes they're like, yeah, you should go to bed, right? Go to bed on time, or at least start to prepare for it so I can show them certain habits, but ultimately they are the ones who are making the decision or the choice. And I need to be here as a father, almost like the prodigal son, right? Like allow them to go out and do what it is they have to do and still remain here as a father, welcoming and excited about when they come back to me to, for whatever it is. And not that they have to come back to me in shambles. I'm not saying that, but just to be proud of the journey that they are on, as opposed to being the other son, which is like, well, I did all this the correct way. I know. I would like you to have your own journey and be proud of whatever journey it is that you took, even at this little age of 5. Like I'm like some of the things that I talked to Paul about is like me not attempting to give him his emotion. Like I'm not telling Paul if he's angry. I'm like, what is that? And he tells me, oh, I'm this. And I'm like, well, what does that feel like? Oh, I just, sometimes he allows me to do it. Sometimes he's like, I just don't want to talk about it. I'm like, okay, well, whenever you're ready, I'm here for you to talk about it. He's 5. He's been doing that since he's 4, 3 or 4. Like this is the way that he is because I want him to choose what it is, not tell me whether he's angry or not. All right. I left talking about our kids going off into the world, Elijah being going to school. And the thing that I told his teacher was like, just don't, you're allowed to run the classroom the way that you want to run it to. But when you come back to me, like my thing is not to make him be upset about going to school. Right? Like at kindergarten and the first grade, this is not the time for him to be like, I don't want to go to school anymore because of the way that this teacher is. And I don't want to be that either for him as his parent, like making him not want to do these things. Like I want him to experience these things for himself and and really taking it from his own and him being able to decide whether this is for him or not. I can't make Elijah be in alignment or harmony with me specifically. Like it's like I need to accept them for what and who it is that they are. Last week we spoke about and I posted it because I thought it was such an awesome word, and it was a Jewish proverb of Anava. Is what I ended up. I went back and I did the research of Anava, and it was the word that they use for being humble, right? And it's about taking their place in the world, being what it was that they were made to be, or how they see themselves, both the positiveness of it, both and the negative of it. Just them taking their full space in the world and allowing it to happen. I just thought it just brings me and me as the father accepting of it or allowing for it. Or really, they don't need my permission to do it. right? They really need the permission for themselves at whatever point it is. But for me not to be kind of hovering over them and saying, this is the direct and path for it to go. Like I'm going to create a structure as a parent, but I know I'm creating the structure for it to be broken because there's no way that they're going to go and not resent me, be on this one path because it's the way that I want it to be. No, choose your path. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it. I'll deal with it as a father when we get there in that moment. It's such a beautiful thing.
Hmm. Hmm. And you said that word was what?
Anava. Anavah. I think is how it's spelled.
I think it's interesting what you're saying because we truly are not the author or finisher of our children, and there's so many teachers in our children, so many. There's us, there's the father. If there's a father, there's the mother. If the mother is still present, there's the cousins or the siblings, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, the next door neighbor. There's the student, their peers, there's the teachers, there's the bus driver, the principals, there's the TV and the characters in the video games and the characters on the cartoons and the TV and the sitcoms and the movies. There's the social media and whatever social media that they use. And then there's the social media that other kids use that they share with them. There's just the thought themselves, being in themselves and how they take in information. There's a point in the Matrix. I feel like I have been on a movie reference. Gosh. Yeah, and it makes sense for me, right? Because I am a very visual style learner. I even see things according to my testimony earlier, like I was not there while I'm watching a movie, listening to a book, and walking on a treadmill. I still managed to leave all three of those activities at one time to go off into my own visual cue in my mind and then show back up for this one moment where all things collided and I knew exactly which everything was doing. So very visual learner. But it's the second Matrix, I believe it was, where Neo goes to see the Merovingi. I think that's what his name was. And like this guy knows everything. And he's sitting there and he's speaking to Neo as he offers a piece of cake to a woman and he is explaining causality. And I'm just like, my gosh. And he's talking about how people think that they are in control when the truth is nobody is in control. I mean, you can always go back and revisit it to see for yourself how that all plays out. Of course, it plays out for his own sole purpose at that moment. But that's not the reason why I mentioned it. It's just the more that we think about the control that we impose on others, there's a possibility that we realize the less control we actually have, right? And there are some of us who start to understand that there is a certain amount of control. But this brings me back to my previous question about harmony and like who really has the power of harmony. Do I? Do I have the power simply because I've chosen? Does Mike? Does his children? Do my children? Does the pastor? Does the president? Or is like that some type of power that's just like up above my head and I just happen to be privy to what this is because somebody studied it one day and put it inside of a book?
Questions that beget more questions, man. Questions that beget more questions. I think just where I am right now, I think you have a choice to be harmonious within yourself. Whatever your life looks like, whatever is going on, you ask 10 different people what's happening within their life, you have 10 different challenges and problems, right? And the way that you relate to it. Now, when you start talking about being harmonious with someone else, I don't think that those are choices that people would have to make together, right? Like, and even that choice. And are you accepting of the choice? Because some people may say, "No, I don't want to be in harmony with you," and even that is harmony because whether you choose to
Yes.
accept it or not,
Yes.
whether,
That's
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
that's it.
whether you choose to accept it or not is really going to dictate. that next piece of it, right? So, but
Yes.
man, there's so once again the expansiveness of it, and here's something that a person can take, and I'll end with this is that because this was so full for me today, was that you get to this point where there's all of these questions. Right? Like you get there's questions, just beget more questions and beget more questions, and you could just get deeper into it, and there's more because I started off the journey this way and now I'm here at this journey. I'm like, am I almost feel like I'm at the beginning of this journey again. I just express it differently, so on and so forth. And so you have a litany of choices. I'm just going to name two. And you can look at it from like the scarcity standpoint and really where it's shades of gray, right? But you can look at it from scarcity or you can look at it from like abundance and anywhere in between on the scale, which is probably where most of us end up, right? Somewhere in between. But if you look at it from the scarcity place where it becomes rigid and it becomes binary, hey, life becomes super simple. You got either choice to make, and it could be just as simple as that and just as hard as that. Or you could look at it from this abundant space where just like, my kid asked me, can I stay up after, 9 tonight or something? And, normally the answer is like yes or no. Or you can get super wondrous or curious about it and be like, what about tonight is different from yesterday night? And like just be in the questions and be in the moment of your child action. Because what are they asking you? Right? Like we came by, it might be this assumption, oh, they're asking me this because, they don't want to go to sleep or, they want to watch this show or whatever it is. Like that's some of the things that could come to mind. I'm just naming what I would think make a part of me would make an assumption. Or it could be something as simple as, they want to spend an extra 30 minutes with you because they find being around you just nurturing and loving, or they want to be with you because of, maybe there's a fear going on or there's some type of anxiety and they find solace in being around you. Like all of these things can come out of just being in this place of just abundance and just curiosity and wonder. And like there's all of these things, and then what do? Like you can get anxious with that, right? Or excited with that. And it's really like, it's like, okay, so what's just the next thing? The next thing is like really feeling into your wants. Like if they stay up stay up later, like what are you fulfilling for yourself as well? Like now you get a chance to kind of be, you know, s- some people call it selfish, but I would call it self-centered, centering of self, like really indulging in your wants and your desires of, yeah, yeah, I want this, or I don't want this, or maybe you can go in your room and, do this or do that. But there's so much abundance. There's so much things that can come out of that. And that just really brings me joy of just being in that place of abundance and wonderment and love and that to me is just this full life. Or you could come from this scarcity spot where it's just like it's either or life, and then it's gonna go this way because my mindset is going this way, and I've already made these assumptions. I've already seen this 1,000 times, and this is gonna be the experience. But experience can be different. You may end up having the same result. Them getting up early in the morning and tired and lagging around or whatever it is, like that may still happen, but at that moment, it might just be a different thing. And not as a matter of fact, it is a different thing because you're meeting it differently. It's not the same thing because you're meeting this moment differently. And you can choose that. And you can choose all of these moments to meet them differently with curiosity, with love, with joy, with whatever it is, with abundance. You can start to see this pattern in your life and just start to show up fully yourself. Like, what is that like? What could it be like? I say run some experiments on it, man. Run some experiments. And with that, I'm done. Go ahead, brother. You could love to hear your thoughts.
I think harmony at the end of this show, or at the time that we're getting ready to close out, I believe harmony is just like many other things. I believe these things are things that are, to quote an old government saying, so much higher than our pay grade. Love higher than our pay grade, compassion, joy, wonderment, anger, frustration, emotions. I think they're all so much higher than our pay grade. But I'm thankful to God that we get opportunity to experience them. And I'm thankful that we have the nature of choice and decisions. And I love the idea of experimentation. I think that that's the right word. I also think that practice is a good word because every single day there's a slight difference. And I love your analogy of the child, because you could do the exact same thing and they could wake up differently every day. You could mix it up and they could wake up the same. But by whose judgment, right? There may still be something different when you think everything's the same, like they got up at the same time, but their mind may be different. You just don't see it yet because the seed first grows under the ground before it sprouts. Or, maybe they're at a point where you get a chance to see a new branch or fruit. And so you get a chance to witness changes. I think all of us are like in that space at some place and time. And all of this is like the great experiment. It's humanity, right? We've been gifted with X amount of ability to use our brain cells and to conceptualize things, which makes us the higher form of creation. And it's like Solomon said, it's all vanity of vanities. There's like this destination end at some point in time when ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And then it's like we were just blips in the entire span. So at the end of the day, I just think, learning to enjoy life, highs and lows, the best that a human being can do, learning to enjoy those that are around you. And when you are unable to enjoy them, learning to enjoy the inability of enjoyment, learning how to position oneself. I love that word harmony because it means that soft can meet rigid, flexible can meet rigid, soft can meet hard, night can meet day, and they can coexist without changing each other. I think that's a beautiful thought, a beautiful concept, and it's a beautiful aim. Me.
People, see you next week. Well,
Peace.